Hey there, ambitious entrepreneurs and future business builders. I'm Lei, and welcome back to another episode where we dive deep into the strategies that can transform your business dreams into reality. Let me set the scene. You've got a brilliant business idea. You're passionate, you're motivated, and you're ready to change the world. But here's the brutal truth that nobody wants to talk about. 90% of startups fail. That's right, 9 out of 10. So what's going wrong? Are successful entrepreneurs just lucky? Do they have some secret sauce the rest of us don't know about? Well, today I'm going to share something that completely flipped my understanding of how to build a successful business, especially when you're working with limited resources. We're talking about the lean startup method, a revolutionary approach that turns uncertainty from your biggest enemy into your greatest teacher. By the end of this episode, you'll understand exactly how to build a sustainable business without burning through your savings, and why the traditional build a perfect product and they will come approach is actually a recipe for disaster. So grab your notebook, because we're about to dive into the blueprint that's helped countless entrepreneurs turn shoestring budgets into thriving businesses. Let's start with a reality check that might sting a little bit. We've all heard those inspiring rags to riches stories, right? The media loves showing us these brilliant entrepreneurs who achieved greatness through pure determination and hustle. And unconsciously, we start thinking, hey, if they can do it, so can I. I just need to work harder, be smarter, have a better product. But here's what's fascinating. If success were really that simple, wouldn't we see billionaires on every street corner? The harsh reality is that most people end up building careers in established companies, forming the backbone of America's middle class. And that's not a failure, by the way, but it does tell us something important about the nature of entrepreneurship. So what actually drives startup success? Business schools will tell you it's about solid business plans, well-defined strategies, and thorough market research. Sounds logical, right? But here's the problem. This advice works great for established companies with years of data and stable markets. Startups, however, operate in complete uncertainty. Both your product and your customers are constantly evolving. When you try to manage a startup like an established company using forecasts and detailed business plans, you almost always fail. Okay, so what about the opposite approach? What about the just do it mentality? Many entrepreneurs think, forget the planning, let's just build something and launch it to test the waters. Well, guess what? They fail just as miserably. Here's the breakthrough insight that changed everything for me. Entrepreneurship isn't some mystical talent that only a lucky few are born with. It's a management skill, and like any skill, it can be learned, practiced, and mastered. Now, I know what you're thinking. Management? That sounds so corporate, so rigid. How can you manage something as dynamic and disruptive as a startup? Well, that's exactly the paradox we need to solve, and it's precisely what determines whether a startup thrives or dies. This brings us to the first game-changing principle that Eric Ries introduced in The Lean Startup. And this one completely revolutionized how I think about building businesses. Most entrepreneurs think about value the traditional way. Create something awesome for your customers, deliver great benefit, eliminate waste. This works perfectly when you already know who your customers are and what they want. But here's the startup dilemma. We don't even know who our customers are yet, let alone what they value. So Eric Ries flipped the script entirely. For startups, value equals learning about customers and their needs. Everything else? It's waste. I want you to really absorb this because it changes everything. Your productivity isn't measured by how many features you build, how much code you write, or how polished your product looks. It's measured by how much you learn about your actual customers. This is called validated learning, and it's the foundation of everything we're going to talk about today. Let me tell you a story that really drives this home. Ries and his team spent months perfecting their first product. I'm talking about really perfecting it. Beautiful design, elegant code, cutting-edge features. They were so proud of what they'd built. And then they launched it. And you know what happened? Nobody wanted it. Nobody. They had to abandon everything and start over. Can you imagine that feeling? All that time, all that effort, all that passion Completely wasted. But here's the thing, it didn't have to be that way. They could have learned the same lesson in a fraction of the time with a fraction of the resources. Think about it like this. If you're a science nerd like me, you already know the answer to avoiding this trap. You develop a hypothesis and test it through controlled experiments. That's exactly how validated learning works in the startup world. Instead of wondering whether your product will work or guessing whether customers will come, you design experiments that put you in direct contact with real customers whose behaviors you can actually study. Take Zappos, for example. Before they became the billion-dollar company that Amazon acquired, they started with one simple hypothesis. Will people buy shoes online? And if they do, will they buy from us? They didn't build a massive inventory system. They didn't perfect their website. They created a simple test, put it in front of real customers, and studied what happened. As they encountered new problems, they tested new hypotheses. These experiments didn't just give them data, they gave them actual customers and a working business model. Here's why this approach is so much more powerful than traditional market research. First, reality beats theory every single time. Customers struggle to articulate what they want, especially regarding products that don't exist yet. How many times have you seen market surveys showing overwhelming enthusiasm for a product that then completely flops when it launches? Second, actions speak louder than words. There's a huge difference between someone saying they'd buy your product and actually pulling out their credit card. Experiments show you what people actually do, not what they say they do. And third, experiments become products. When you run a successful experiment, you're not just collecting data. You're building a working product with real customers who are already engaged and ready for your broader launch. This approach builds strategy through validation rather than educated guesswork. And that leads us perfectly into the second principle that'll completely transform how you approach building your business. All right, now that we understand the power of validated learning, let's talk about how to actually implement it. This is where the rubber meets the road, and it's called the build, measure, learn cycle. This is the engine that drives everything in the lean startup methodology. Think of this cycle as your GPS for navigating the uncertainty of building a business. It keeps you moving in the right direction and helps you course correct quickly when you're heading down the wrong path. The cycle starts with building something called a minimum viable product, or MVP. Now, here's where most people get confused. They think an MVP means building a crappy version of their ultimate product. That's not it at all. An MVP is the smallest thing you can build that tests your most important hypotheses about your business. The rule for developing an MVP is beautifully simple. Remove any feature, process, or effort that does not contribute directly to the learning you seek. That's it. If it doesn't help you learn something critical about your customers, cut it out. Let me give you some examples that'll blow your mind. If you're a gamer, you've probably noticed the rise of early access games. Developers start with a basic concept, create a game with only core features, interact with the community, add or remove features based on feedback, and repeat this cycle until they have a hit. Many of these games achieve tremendous success using exactly this approach. Or consider what's called a concierge MVP. You start with a single service, sometimes just a concept for a single customer. You test your business model by providing personalized service to one person. Each iteration tests your hypotheses and serves a few more customers. Sounds incredibly inefficient, right? Well, that's exactly how Food on the Table found their growth model. Here's my favorite example, Aardvark, an AI search tool. Their AI was so bad that they had to hire real people to answer questions behind the scenes. Customers thought they were interacting with advanced AI, but it was actually humans doing the work. Sounds ridiculous, right? Google bought them for $50 million. The point isn't to trick people, it's to test whether your core value proposition works before you invest in building the perfect technology. Once you launch your MVP, you move to the measure phase. And this is where most startups shoot themselves in the foot. They focus on what Eric Ries calls vanity metrics, things like total number of users, total revenue, or page views. These metrics feel good when they go up, but they don't actually tell you anything useful about your business. Vanity metrics are dangerous because as long as the numbers are going up, people feel like they're making progress. And when the numbers go down, well, it must be someone else's fault, right? These metrics don't give you any clear direction about what to do next. Instead, you need actionable metrics, measurements that demonstrate clear cause and effect and tell you exactly what to do next. For example, knowing that your customer registrations increased by 30% doesn't help much. But knowing that your customer registrations increased by 30% because you redesigned your landing page, now you know exactly what to replicate and how to improve further. The best tools for creating actionable metrics are cohort analysis and split testing. Cohort analysis tracks groups of users who share common characteristics over time, helping you understand how different segments engage with your product. Split testing lets you offer different versions of your product to customers at the same time, so you can see which performs better. The beautiful thing is you can integrate these tests directly into your product development. They not only help you understand your customers, but also save massive resources by identifying which features actually matter and which ones you can skip entirely. Now comes the learn phase, and this is where things get emotionally challenging. After running your experiments and measuring the results, you need to make a decision. Do you pivot or persevere? This decision is particularly hard when you're making some progress, have some customers, and generating some revenue. It's emotionally painful to abandon something you've poured your heart and resources into. But here's the brutal truth. Companies that fail to pivot when they should get stuck in what Reese calls the land of the living dead. They're not growing enough, and they're not dying, just barely surviving while constantly draining morale and burning cash. Let me tell you about Wealthfront. They created a financial simulation game called Kaching to test their business hypotheses. The launch was huge. Over 450,000 people signed up to play. Success, right? Well, when they tried to convert these gamers into paying customers for their actual financial services, the conversion rate was essentially zero. The experiment clearly rejected their hypotheses. It wasn't easy to abandon a game with nearly 500,000 users, but they pivoted. Wealthfront later became one of Fast Company's most innovative companies in finance and raised over $180 million. The key insight here is that whether a startup succeeds depends on how many pivots it can make before running out of money. The number of pivots depends on your runway, your remaining cash divided by your monthly burn rate. The faster you can complete the build, measure, learn cycle, and the lower the cost of each learning cycle, the better your chances of finding success. This is why speed matters so much in startups. It's not about moving fast to beat competitors. It's about maximizing your number of opportunities to get it right before you run out of resources. Now let's talk about the third principle that ties everything together: sustainable growth. Because at the end of the day, learning is great, but we need to turn all that learning into a business that actually grows and makes money. Here's something that might surprise you about sustainable growth. It's not about getting featured in TechCrunch or having a viral moment on social media. Sustainable growth is characterized by one simple rule: new customers come from the actions of past customers. Think about that for a moment. Your existing customers are the engine that brings you new customers. There are 4 ways this happens. Word of mouth, where growth comes from customer enthusiasm as a side effect of product usage, like how Facebook or PayPal naturally expand as people use them. Through funded advertising, where the revenue from existing customers funds the acquisition of new ones. And through repeat purchases or subscriptions. This gives us 3 distinct engines of growth, and here's the crucial part. You need to pick one and master it before trying anything else. The first is the sticky engine of growth. This is all about retention. Companies like Netflix or your cell phone provider use this model. They focus obsessively on their churn rate, the percentage of customers who stop using their service. Growth happens when your new customer acquisition rate exceeds your churn rate. It sounds simple, but getting this balance right requires deep understanding of why customers stay and why they leave. The second is the viral engine of growth, Like the name suggests, this depends on person-to-person transmission. Think Facebook, TikTok, or any social platform. The key metric here is the viral coefficient, how many new customers each existing customer brings. If your viral coefficient is greater than 1, you get exponential growth. These companies usually don't charge users directly, but make money through advertising or other indirect methods. The third is the paid engine of growth. This is where you acquire customers through advertising, and your growth rate depends on the difference between customer lifetime value and customer acquisition cost. If a customer is worth $100 to you over their lifetime, and it costs you $30 to acquire them, you have $70 to reinvest in growth. Many traditional retailers use this model. Here's the crucial insight. You should thoroughly explore one engine before moving to others. Too many startups try to do everything at once and end up doing nothing well. Pick the engine that best fits your business model, measure its effectiveness using specific metrics, and optimize the hell out of it. But as you're optimizing for growth, there's one trap you need to avoid. In the pursuit of speed and learning, it's easy to accumulate technical debt and quality issues. You're moving fast, testing quickly, sometimes cutting corners to get feedback faster, but eventually you'll pay the price if you completely ignore quality. This is where the 5 whys technique becomes invaluable. When something goes wrong, instead of just fixing the surface problem, you dig deeper to find the root cause. Why did the website crash? Because traffic spiked. Why did traffic spike? Because our marketing campaign was more successful than expected. Why weren't we prepared for success? Because we didn't have proper monitoring in place. Why don't we have monitoring? Because we've been focused only on feature development. Why are we only focused on features? Because we haven't built quality processes into our development cycle. By the 5th why, you've identified the real issue and can implement a systematic solution rather than just putting a Band-Aid on the problem. Here's a crucial point. Don't turn the 5 whys into the 5 blames. The goal isn't to find who screwed up. It's to build better systems that prevent problems from happening again. Now, I want to tie all of this together with something that completely shifted my perspective on startups and resource management. Throughout this entire process, the learning, the experimenting, the pivoting, there's one technique that accelerates everything, working in small batches. This might sound counterintuitive. In manufacturing, big batches are more efficient, but startups aren't manufacturing companies. Your goal isn't to produce products efficiently. It's to learn how to build a sustainable business as quickly as possible. Small batches excel at identifying and fixing problems much faster. Instead of spending 6 months building a complete product only to discover it doesn't work, you can test core assumptions in weeks or even days. This speeds up your build, measure, learn cycle and gives you more pivot opportunities before you run out of cash. Every startup has limited resources, whether that's money, time, or energy. The lean startup method isn't just a nice philosophy. It's a survival strategy for resource-constrained entrepreneurs. So let me leave you with your action plan. If you're ready to build a business without burning through your life savings, here's exactly what you need to do. First, embrace learning over vanity metrics. If an activity doesn't teach you something valuable about your customers, it's probably waste. Stop measuring yourself by how much you build and start measuring yourself by how much you learn. Second, master the build, measure, learn cycle. Create minimum viable products that test your biggest assumptions, measure customer responses with actionable metrics, and make data-driven decisions about your next steps. Remember, the goal is speed of learning, not perfection of product. Third, develop the courage to pivot when your experiments consistently disprove your hypotheses. The faster you identify what doesn't work, the more opportunities you'll have to find what does work. Fourth, work in small batches to accelerate your learning cycles. This approach identifies problems faster and reduces waste compared to trying to perfect large-scale launches. Fifth, choose one growth engine and master it completely before diversifying your approach. Whether it's sticky, viral, or paid growth, become excellent at one before attempting others. And finally, build quality into your speed by implementing the 5 whys technique to address root causes systematically. Here's what I want you to remember above everything else. Entrepreneurship isn't about having some mystical talent that only a few lucky people possess. It's about applying learnable management skills systematically. The lean startup method gives you those skills and dramatically increases your chances of building a sustainable business, even with limited resources. So here's my challenge for you. Which of these principles could solve your biggest current business challenge? Are you stuck because you're building without learning? Are you measuring the wrong things? Are you afraid to pivot when the data clearly shows you should? I respond to every comment personally, so head over to the original article at bullishbooks.com and let me know what your biggest challenge is right now. Let's troubleshoot it together using these lean startup principles. And if you found this episode valuable, make sure you subscribe to the Bullish Books newsletter for more practical insights on entrepreneurship and business strategy. We're building a community of ambitious entrepreneurs who are committed to turning their ideas into reality without burning through their savings. Remember, every successful business started with someone who was willing to learn, adapt, and persist through uncertainty. The lean startup method just gives you a proven framework for doing it faster, cheaper, and more effectively. Until next time, keep building, keep learning, and keep pushing forward. I'm Lei, and I'll see you in the next episode.